Here we are again, HMA Interview podcast. I'm Sam Herring, joined today by a very special guest, D. Roper. I've been trying to get him on for a very long time, ever since I started this podcast. He's been at the top of my list, and so I'm really excited to get this one going.
Sam, I'm a big fan, man. I love what you do. There's a lot of kindred spirit, man. I can remember being your age like it was yesterday. And man, I'm a lot like you. You're a go-getter. You know what you want. You love the sport a whole lot, and you're living your life really well, man. So really been observing from afar, and I'm a huge fan of what you do. You're a pretty special young man. Let you know that right off the top.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I've been blessed to have a lot of role models to help me go along in this, and it's been really fun.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, let's jump right into the interview. Start talking about your wrestling career, and let's start right at the beginning. How did you get involved with the sport of wrestling?
Actually, it's kind of been a theme through my whole wrestling career. My path through wrestling's been a lot of setback and adversity, and that's kind of what's made me who I am. So I didn't make the basketball team in middle school, and it was one of the first times that I really felt kind of injustice in my life. I was really blessed. My parents provided everything for my brother and I. I just kind of had to leave it to Beaver family, and just man, had a great childhood. But politics involved, didn't make the team over this one guy that I knew I was better than, and I was kind of upset about it. And just getting some advice from my dad. He's kind of a sage of wisdom. He's like, well, just go try something new. I mean, young, it was the end of my life, but wrestling was new at my school. It had just started. I was in 7th grade, and so I went out and tried it. And from that very first day, I came home and told my mom I found my people. So it was just something different about putting wrestling shoes on and really going to combat with another person that just, I don't know, it satisfied something in my heart that nothing I had ever done had filled, man. And I've just been doing it ever since. Ever since that day, I've just been eating up with it. I can't get enough. So a little bit of a roundabout way of getting started late compared to most people, but I doubled up and caught up through my high school days, worked pretty hard and put in a lot of hours. So ended up having a pretty good career.
How old were you at the time when you started wrestling?
So 7th grade is my first introduction to it. How old are you in 7th grade? What, probably 13?
I'm in 7th grade, yeah.
13?
Mm-hmm.
So right about then, that's when I had, and
yes,
I
sir.
honestly thought it was going to be, I had no idea what wrestling was, really had no clue. Only thing I knew was professional wrestling. So I knew it wasn't exactly that, but I had no idea what I was getting into. So completely, man, just completely naive for the journey I was about to go on for the next 20 years of my life. But it's been a fun one.
So what about wrestling do you think it introduced you so much to this passion that you have now? What about wrestling do you love so much?
Well, the sport itself, I really enjoyed being in control of my own destiny, so to speak. I wanted to do something in college. I wanted to be a college athlete. I was a pretty good baseball player, and that was my passion at the time. So that was really my plan. I was going to go to college and be a baseball player, and then probably end up coaching after that in baseball. But I don't know. Sometimes getting recognized, your team needs to do well, and there was those frustrations. And again, there's some politics involved, especially at my school with baseball. So I don't know, man. Just being able to control what I was going to do in my future, well, how hard I worked, and it just be me against another guy, and all I needed was wrestling shoes, a wrestling mat, a whole lot of time, and one guy willing to put in the time with me, and I could be about as good as I wanted to. But I don't know. I kind of got a theory, like I've got some theories that I think too much about stuff. So this is what I think wrestling's so great and why it satisfies something in you that, man, not many things else do. So we've evolved over a lot of time. Millions of years humans have to do a few certain things. So we've evolved to run, and that's why there's this crazy running community where people just love running and there's nothing at stake. They just really enjoy it. It satisfies something in our DNA going on a long run. We've evolved to do it. We evolved to climb. That's why there's these crazy rock climbing communities that just love doing it. It's part of who they are. It becomes part of their personality. And we also evolved to be in combat. We had to survive. We had to fight. So those combat sports, boxing, wrestling, MMA, any kind of martial arts, they're kind of ingrained in who we are. So I think it satisfies something on a primal level for me that just not much else has. I've gotten into running lately through one of a big booster we had, big supporter we had was big into running. And he ended up getting cancer and pass away. So kind of living in his memory, I picked up running, and it's similar, but I don't know, man. There's just something about going into combat. That picture right behind you, right there, with Burroughs and
Oh yeah.
Martinez. Man, there's something about that I just got to have in my life, and just I'm gonna do it as long as God keeps blessing me to do it. And then, kind of segueing into that, man, faith's a big part of my life. I was raised. My parents told me the whole time about living a life of service. That's really the purpose of life: is find out what you're good at and use it to help other people in God's service. So I really believe, Sam, I was put on earth to be a wrestling coach. I think that was that feeling I had that very first day when I told my mom I found my people. I'd kind of found my calling a little bit, that I had stepped foot into what God was going to take and make something pretty special and make it a blessed journey in my life. Because I'm telling you, man, the success I had as an athlete, which, I mean, if we talk about it more, you'll hear the disappointment and you'll see some of that. But really, man, I had a good career. I can't complain with what I did. And then the success I've had as a coach, that's not me. Like, there's something bigger than myself that's orchestrating this. For what it is, I have no idea, but I just know I'm going to keep putting in the work and let God take care of what he's going to use it for. So that's part of it too. I think it satisfies something on that primal level. And then it definitely, for me, satisfies the thing on the spiritual level of why I'm put on earth.
That makes a lot of sense, and I've never really heard it described to that depth. Really interesting to hear your perspective on that. But so in your wrestling career, as you started out, how much success did you have early on, and what was like your growth pattern like?
So I don't remember a lot from my early, like, 7th, 8th grade years of wrestling. Like, there's not too many vivid memories of competition. I remember my first one though, because I was growing, so I was a little bit chubby. I was big for my age. I matured early. So I was in this singlet, and it was kind of awkward and weird. It was in a rival high school right nearby, and I thought they were the Iowa of Georgia wrestling. I had no idea. So I was kind of nervous going in, and man, it was just that world when you kind of remember when you're first starting wrestling or you jump to a new level, things are moving so fast, you have no idea what was going on. But I remember switching, and as I was switching, the guy kind of turned and faced me, and he was on his knees, and I just haymakered a headlock and put him on his back and pinned him. And then I'm just, man, team going crazy, coach going crazy. I was hooked from that moment on, and just remember talking about how nervous my mom was. And my mom's a pretty reserved person, but she's talking about like fighting up in the stands with me, and it was just a cool experience all around. So I had a pretty good bit of success through middle school, but it was more from lack of competition than really being good at all. And then going into high school, I got fourth my freshman year, and just basically on grit. I would shoot double legs until the other guy got tired of sprawling. And I was naturally pretty strong guy, but no wrestling skill really whatsoever. I was in good shape and I would wrestle really hard. So I ended up placing at state, which at Georgia, really back in those days, it's not what Georgia is now. So really not that big a deal. And then I started getting pretty committed going into my sophomore year and going to camps, and knew I needed more technique. So started delving into that aspect a little bit. And I tell you, I ended up making a big weight cut that year. Watch Vision Quest, man, every wrestler goes through that. So I went on my Vision Quest, and there was a really good guy named Matt Herring, the weight class below me. And it was a really big weight cut. Like 145 that year was, man, it was a pretty big sacrifice for me. But man, I was on my Vision Quest. I was going to go, and that guy was going to take me to the heights I wanted to be at in wrestling. So I ended up cutting way down. And to make a long story short, my movie didn't end up like Vision Quest. He took me down about 11 times in the state finals and really embarrassed me pretty badly. So that's when I really got crazy about wrestling. Really, I sat down with my dad and I was like, Dad, I want this. Like, I want it. This is what I want to do. I want to go and be a college wrestler. Man, I want to win state titles. I want to be a national champ. I want to be a world champ. I didn't even know world championship was freestyle at the time. So my dad, he's a little bit like me. When he gets into something, he really gets into it. So he did a bunch of research on the best wrestling technique video cassettes. It wasn't even DVDs back then. It was VHS tapes that we could get. And we came on the Granby system of wrestling, and we ordered one and kind of did our homework, and man, we loved it. It was systematical, and I'm an analytical guy, so it just fit me. So we ordered all of them. and I went nutty that summer. So here was my probably 150 days where I really made a huge jump in wrestling, technically and from a confidence standpoint. So I would go into work with my mom in the morning. She would go in about 6:30, and she would drop me off at our wrestling room. Our wrestling room was at like an auxiliary gym at a middle school, so it wasn't like heightened security. You can't get in there. Like we could get in about any time we wanted to. So she dropped me
Right.
off at 6:30. Very fortunate I had a guy named Scott Kanicki that was very crazy like me. And that guy, I owe that guy so much. And he showed up with me, went into work with his parents, and then we practiced for probably 6 or 7 hours that day. We'd take breaks and eat lunch, have food. We had a little Nintendo in the back where we'd play some video games in our break, but we'd be on the mat about 7 or 8 hours. And then my dad would pick me up after workouts and we'd go home. And I did that every day until school started back. And just logging that many hours, 5 days a week on the wrestling mat, man, it got me a lot better. And I really did make a big jump. I placed at NHSCA's that summer, ended up only losing one match the next year, won a state title. Same thing the year after that, won a state title, got to be a college wrestler, mainly because my grades were really good. I probably wasn't good enough to be a legit Division I recruit, knowing what I know now, but it opened the window to where I was good enough and I did well enough in school that I was fortunate that I got a scholarship to go to App State, and then spent 5 years there trying to figure out how to be a Division I wrestler. And it was pretty much a lot of the same thing, being real naive and working my tail off.
That's awesome. So you talked about your recruiting stage is mostly because of your academics and stuff. Were there any other schools you were looking at other than App State? I mean, that's kind of like the school in the South that's kind of close to where you lived. There's that and UT Chat, North Carolina, schools like that are down there. But any other
Yeah.
schools that you were looking at?
Yeah. I had the grades to go Ivy if I wanted to, but my dad, he can see into the future really well, and sat down and talked about, my brother had thought about that route too. My brother did incredibly well academics, way better than I did. That's kind of what his life's work went about. But that's another story for another time. So I knew the Ivy route wasn't for me. I was probably going to be a teacher and a wrestling coach and didn't need all the debt that goes with an Ivy League diploma to be a teacher. I'd still be paying it off for the rest of my life till the day I die. So he kind of was like, that's out of the picture. Not going to let you do that. So I started looking at some of the better public academic schools and actually decided I was going to go to North Carolina. That was one of the places that I'd gone to camp a lot and developed a relationship with Jaworski. He really liked my work ethic. And so that's kind of where I decided I was going to go. And that was the plan. Well, going into time to sign and commit, Jaworski ended up not having a job there anymore. And I didn't like the head coach near as much. So decided to go look around again, didn't know anything about it, and kind of put myself in a bad spot. Wasn't a whole lot of money left, but App State had a lot of interest in me and offered me a scholarship. Went there. NC State recruited me some, UT Chat, and I might have gone to Chattanooga, but I had a few buddies that were there and actually told me not to go. And it's funny because the next year Brands comes in, and sometimes I think about, man, what could that have been? Because I got some regrets in my wrestling career in college. Some fault of my own, some not my own, but I got some regrets. And like, what would it have been like to wrestle for Brands? What could I have gotten out of myself? But that's the way life goes, man. You're going to have regrets and you're going to think back to that stuff all the time. But I had a great career. Loved App State, man. I'm an outdoors guy, and there's no place better than that. And I developed a
Oh,
really
yeah.
good relationship with John Mark Bentley while I was there. Guy I still look up to a lot. And it's kind of weird that have the same job as him now. It's kind of, my life came a little full circle with that stuff.
That's crazy. So you decided not to go to UT Chat, and then Brands came in the next year.
Yeah. Yep. So it was one of those things. It's like, what could have been, or it might have been 2 years later. I don't know, man. I've been hitting the head a lot. Stuff gets a little bit fuzzy as time goes on, but I would have enjoyed wrestling for Brands. I'm kind of wired that way. I'm kind of a psycho. So knowing how I would have enjoyed wrestling for Doug and being around him every day, and what I've heard about Terry from one of my really good friends, Matt Pitts, who wrestled for him, I would have loved it, man. And I would have liked to have seen how far he could have taken my wrestling career.
Wasn't one of your first wrestling experiences at Iowa at camp?
Yeah, and that goes back to how naive we were. So again, back in the dial-up internet days, my dad gets on there and just looks up wrestling. Like, I got to go get better. And of course, Iowa wrestling comes up. It was right at the end of Gable's era. So that's all it was, man, was Iowa wrestling. So he sent me out to an intensive camp out there. And I remember my mom being so mad at him for putting me on a plane and sending me out there. We didn't know anybody. I barely knew anything about the sport. And Sam, let me tell you what, I got my butt kicked for 6 or 7 days, however long the camp was. I was on my back the whole time, but I loved it. I don't know why I loved it. Being around McElravy, and that was kind of my host there. He took care of me a little bit. He became the guy I really looked up to. I don't know, man. These were like the greatest wrestlers of all time, and I was in the same building as them, and I could watch what they do and see it and be like, all right, I can do that. Like, I can work that hard. The skill level, I have no idea what they're doing, but I can work that hard. So again, that kind of shaped the experience. And tell a little story real quick is probably changed my life. Not being hyperbolic. I'm serious. So Gable, he wasn't around at the camp a whole lot because he had just had surgery. And I think it was his hip or his knee. I can't remember which one. But he came crutching in. He was going to do a motivational talk. And we're in this auditorium. And I still remember who I was sitting next to. This guy had dyed blonde hair. Just one of those things where life kind of slowed down a little bit. And Gable talked about the difference between being good and being great. And I just absorbed every word of it. And I've failed a lot since that day, but I've really tried to put what he said into action. And to keep it fairly short, basically he summed it up as the difference between being good and great is the amount of sacrifice that you'll make. Everything in life has a price. And if you're willing to pay it, you have a chance. You have a chance. It's not guaranteed. You have a chance to achieve it. And he would talk about when he was young and going fishing, and in between casts, he'd do like 10 push-ups, right? Things like that, the little things that if you do them all the time, stack up to being this monumental thing at the end of your career and at the end of your life. And honestly, man, that kind of stuck in my heart and in my soul. And I've been trying to live that way ever since. And I'm a flawed man, so I fail on a lot of occasions, but that's what I try and do, man. I try and stack up a lot of really hard, focused, sacrificing days, and I'll let God make of it what he's going to make of it at the end of my life.
That's really cool. I mean, for you to go, what were you, 2 months into wrestling before that?
You probably can't even say that. Like, I mean, I had a pretty good high school wrestling coach. I don't want to paint him as a bad brush because, man, he loved me, took care of me, man. He motivated me, but he wasn't teaching me a whole lot of wrestling, to be honest. So I really had no skill set to go in and go to an Iowa intensive camp with all those animals that ate me up. But it showed, I'll tell you the good thing about it, it showed me how far away I was from being good, that I knew the sacrifice, what Gable was talking about, was going to be really big. It wasn't going to be able to just, hey, I can do this for 3 months out of the year and go to 1 hour and a half practice and mess around with my buddies while I'm at practice. Like, no, this is going to have to be eat, sleep, breathe it every day of my life to get what I wanted. So it kind of planted that kind of crazy seed in me. And I mean, it's Iowa, so they're breathing that stuff and preaching that stuff up there too. And man, I was a kid in a candy store. I was buying it all, man. I wanted every bit of advice they had to give me.
That's so cool. So did you ever go back to that camp in the next years?
No, I never made it back there. It's probably something at the end. It would have been a cool experience to go back and go through the intensive camp. You know what, Sam? I had a college guy come into a camp I did, and I told myself I'm going to go to a camp. I might go do that. I might go to the Iowa intensive camp and go through that, kind of book into my experiences. That's something I want to get back into, going back to camps again. I have to put that on my bucket list to go back to that camp at some point in my life and go. Maybe that's the very end. When I retire, that's what I do to retire. I go to the Iowa intensive camp and go through that again. That'd be a cool thing to do.
That would be cool. Were you in shape? Were you ready for the intensive camp? Did you struggle at all, or was it just wrestling?
No, that part, all the working out and conditioning, that's what probably got me through it. Because, I mean, the stair runs and Carver, the sprints around the top, like I won all those. Nobody was beating me in that stuff. My dad had raised my brother and I pretty tough. Like, we were pretty tough-minded guys, and he demanded a lot of discipline out of us, even from at a young age. So that part of it was not hard for me. I just had no skills to compete at wrestling. But as far as how intense it was and the waking up early and the runs, man, sign me up. I'm all for that stuff.
That's so great. So back to your recruiting stage for App State. You ended up deciding to go there. At the time, was Coach Russo the coach there?
Paul Mance was the coach there. He had coached for a long time, and come to find out, he had a pretty big interest in leg riders, and that was probably the thing I was best at. I was a pretty good leg rider throughout my whole career, and so piqued his interest through that. And then he saw my grades, and of course, and they were really good at the time. So I made it based on a wrestling decision. I love the area. When I went up there and went on my visit, I mean, it's in the mountain. It's gorgeous, man. If you're an outdoors guy and you're interested in college wrestling, go check out App State. It's really an
Yeah.
amazing place. It really is. But they were good. I mean, they were winning the Southern Conference a lot and winning by a lot of points. And then they had a really good group of guys: Travis Drake, Rich Case, Mark Fee, who ended up being my practice partner. He's a two-time All-American. And they had a lot of really PJ Boscia. They had some guys that really took care of me and were really solid college wrestlers, ranked in the country. So that's one of the reasons I went. They were really good. And that with had the degree I wanted, of course, one applied mathematics. So it was kind of I don't know, kind of a total, nothing was perfect there, but everything was good enough. And man, really, I just wanted to wrestle. It wouldn't have mattered where I went to school, to be honest. I wanted to wrestle. I didn't know enough about the recruiting process or college wrestling to really make an informed decision. My parents didn't either. So I just thank God it ended up being a pretty good situation for me.
That's awesome. So when you when you went there for the first time and you started training in a college room with college coaches and high level partners, what were the gains you made? I imagine it was pretty impressive. I mean, going from where you were in your high school in Georgia to college room in North Carolina State, were there big jumps right away, or did it take you a little while to start seeing the results?
Yeah, I'm sure there were jumps right away. I wish I would have journaled the way I do now through my college career. Man, I've got a few regrets that I didn't really document more of building the compound days, and I didn't journal through college like I should. But I do remember one of my first workouts going in. I worked out with a true freshman, Jason Jones, ended up being one of my good buddies. He's a 141 pounder. So I'm two weight classes bigger than him. I was planning on being a 57, two weight classes bigger than him, and he kicked my butt. I mean, kicked my butt. So again, I had that. I'm behind. I got to go. I got to work. So I had another one of those. I got to put in a lot of work times and just started really grinding on that. And like I said, I was really fortunate who my practice partner was. Had two guys my true freshman year, PJ Boscia and Mark Fee, that really took me under their wing. And by take under their wing, I mean they kicked my butt a whole lot and then would help me after it. And these guys made me good really fast. I ended up starting as a true freshman. So I win my wrestle off, but the guy I beat, it was really close with, right? So our coach comes in like, hey, we don't have a really good 74 pounder. You got your tall frame. You want to go up? I was like, yeah, whatever, man. I just want to wrestle. Again, I don't know anything about college wrestling really. So just sure, put me in the lineup. Well, I lost my very first college wrestling match. I wrestled the number one guy in the country. He's from UPenn, Rick Springman. And I fought my tail off
Wow.
not to get teched. So it was all downhill from there, man. I'd had it as bad as it was. And then lost my next 12 matches. I was 0-13. And coach brings me in the office and I'm thinking it's going to be like, hey man, like you're going to figure it out. Like you're working so hard. You see the extra workouts you're putting in them. And I was on the mat 3 times a day, Sam. Like I was just back to being crazy, putting in a ton of hours again. And brings me in the office and sits me down. And it was the exact opposite of the pat on the back. Here's a hug. Keep working hard. It was like, you ever going to win a match? Like we brought you up here to win. And so, but it was what I needed to hear. So I made a promise to myself after that. I'd lost a bunch of 1-point matches, probably 5 or 6 on that losing streak I was on. I was like, I'm never going to lose another 1-point match. I'm going to lose by 3. I'm going to lose by 6. I'm going to get pinned or I'm going to win it. And I made a big jump from there. And then from there to the conference finals, I only lost one more match and went on a really good run. And you hear people talk about it all the time. I just decided I wasn't going to lose anymore. And I did. It upped my level of intensity and dedication and grit and toughness about what I was willing to do in the 7 minutes on the mat, and made a really big difference. And then once I started winning and got some confidence, the jump started coming a lot faster. I had a lot of footwork issues. I had a guy, Angelo Spadaccini, who was volunteer assistant there. Nobody would know who he was, but man, just a great heart and helped me out with my footwork so much. Joe Boydnott, another guy that just loved wrestling, was around there, helped me out on bottom. And I was a mat wrestler. I would ham fight hard on my feet, and my defense was pretty good, but I won matches on top, and really figured out how to turn good guys and had some help with that along the way. So to answer your question in a long roundabout way, which you'll find out I have a bad habit of doing, yeah, I made some jumps pretty quickly just from I didn't give myself another option. I made a decision I was going to be good, and I burnt the bridge, and I wasn't going back.
So with that improvement, what was the most important part of it? I mean, you said the coach sat you down and you had a talk that really woke you up. You needed that, and it was a lot of grit that you improved on. How much of it was the grit and toughness, and how much was it skill, and how much was it weight cut management, anything like that? What were the biggest areas where you were improving?
Well, I really wasn't cutting any weight. I was cutting no weight. I was actually gaining weight. I was wrestling 174 pounds, which I was not a 174 pounder, not even soaking wet. It was really grit. I mean, I had great coaches. Don't get me wrong. They cared about us. They loved us. I was bitter after my career because we didn't get a whole lot of technical development, but man, he took care of us. So I had to apologize later in my life as I got older and a little bit more understanding of life, but it was grit. 100% was grit. I had to get, I don't know if tougher was the right word, really. I just had to decide I was going to win. It was just learning how to win matches, and it's a skill. And it really helped me as a coach to try and communicate that to athletes. It is a skill you have to practice. Sometimes guys have this picture in their head of how they have to win or how they're supposed to win or how they're going to win. That just gets in the way. You have 7 minutes. The only thing you have to do is score more points than the guy or pin him. And there's a million different ways to do that. And I guess really learning that it didn't matter how I won. If it was a stall call in the third period, if it was turning the guy 6 times in the first, it didn't matter. That the only thing that mattered was getting my hand raised at the end and moving to the right of the bracket. Man, really made a difference. So learning how to win, man. I don't really think it was toughness. I think it was just making my mind up 100% that this is what I was going to do, and I was going to win.
And did you see results coming after that?
It was immediate. I mean, it was really like night and day going into my next match. Confidence level was way different. And as much as I talk about winning here, it probably was, I was less focused on the outcome. And I was just started wrestling really hard. Like I just made up my mind I was going to die out there other than lose. So I was just wrestling way harder. I was putting way more into my matches. I mean, harder hand fight, harder sprawl, harder mat returns, harder working off bottom. It's just, yeah, it was pretty immediate. Night and day from when I made the decision I was going to win to when I started getting some results.
And was that your sophomore year, you said?
That was my freshman year. I started as a true freshman right out of the gate, which I was not ready to, but I don't know. It kind of forced me into making that choice. If I'd have had that redshirt year, I wouldn't have trained the way I did. Not losing those first match, that losing streak I had, man, that really, I've had some work ethic jumps in my life and still continue to. I'm actually in one right now. That was one of the big ones. If I wouldn't have had that losing streak and been in the lineup, I know I wouldn't have had the college career that I did. So thankful for it in a way, even though it was rough at the beginning.
So your sophomore year, did that improvement and those results continue to grow, and did you start looking like you were better and having a lot more confidence in yourself, or did it kind of plateau?
No, it kind of kept going pretty fast. So I lost in the conference finals to a guy from Vienna, Matt Irwin. He was pretty good. He was ranked pretty high in the country at the time, but I lost right at the end of the match. And I'd gone back to, national tournament was my goal that year. I knew I wasn't good enough to be an All-American. I knew it. I'm honest with myself to a fault. That's one of the things about me. So I wanted to go and experience a national tournament. And man, I got the guy so tired that I could see it. Like that third period, I saw myself in the NCAA tournament. I saw myself in the bracket. And instead of motivating me towards, I'm going to do that much more, it scared me and I froze. And I tried to hang on and he ended up getting a takedown at the end and beat me. And I learned a great lesson. And again, man, just took Psycho Roper up through the roof again. And that summer, I just put in a crazy amount of time and made a big jump and ended up having a really good sophomore year and ranked in the country, qualified for NCAAs, and just I had a really good year that year. All around was probably the healthiest I was in my college career, which, man, that was a theme. My body just kind of betrayed me a lot through college, but it was my own fault. I worked myself to death and didn't understand rest. So that's probably the healthiest I was. And I had a really good year, man. I only lost like 4 or 5 matches, 6 matches, and ended up doing really well that year. Had a good career. Had a good season that year.
And so you qualified for NCAAs that year. That was your first experience at the national tournament, or did you ever go before then?
No, that was it. That was the first time I'd seen it, or I mean, I'd watched. Actually, my first match, I watched Doug win his sophomore year at NCAA's, and so that was my first experience there, man. And honestly, it scared me to death. I don't know if I really talked about this ever. I was petrified. I was scared to death of how big it was and how many great guys were in my bracket. I'd never been in a tournament, anything like it. Not even, I mean, nothing comparable. Nothing, no Fargo, not NHSCAs. And it had been a goal of mine for a long time. And it was kind of that realization of, man, great job. But the work wasn't done. It shouldn't have been great job. It's like, pat yourself on the back. This is awesome. Take it in. Now get back to work and go get what you want. So wrestled pretty well my first match. Ended up getting scrambled to death. I had no idea how to scramble in college at all or even what it was. So guy from Ohio State ended up beating me up there. And then I lost my match in the wrestlebacks. Just my head wasn't right. And ended up catching a tough guy from Nebraska. Both guys ended up placing that year. So just caught a bad end of the bracket, went 0-2, and that was my NCAA experience. Never made it back after that. And, we just had Doug's brother came in and talked about, man, you got to take advantage of the opportunities you have. And when he was telling that story, he talked about an NCAA experience he had as a freshman. I thought about my sophomore year. I remember walking out of there. I mean, it was in Kansas City, and I was walking out going, man, I got 2 more shots at this. I got 3 more years of improvement because I knew I was redshirting the next year, and I got 2 more shots at this. There's no way I don't get what I want. No way when I've got 2 chances and I know what I'm going to put into it that I won't get what I want. And I never made it back. Qualification system was way different back then. And Southern Conference was actually pretty tough my last 2 years. Greensboro was doing really well. Citadel had, man, some really highly ranked guys that were tough. And Brands was at UTC, so they were doing what they were doing. And just, man, I never made it back. John Cerritos transferred into UTC, and I could not beat him. Could not beat that guy. He beat me both years beat me in my junior year at the qualifying tournament at conference and didn't get to go. And then the next year I got inside trip to my back and pin my senior year. So never made it back to the national tournament, but man, I lost to good guys. Both guys were all American. So that's kind of one of the things that's got me through it. I didn't go out there and lose to some guys that I was better than. Both guys could wrestle with me. Both guys could beat me. And those days they beat me. That's just the way it goes.
What was the qualification system like then?
So your conference got spots. So the Southern Conference got the Tim Champs went, and then there's 2 wild cards. And the wild cards were just the coaches got in the room and they argued for who they wanted to go. And that's the way it went. So there was 2 other guys that got to qualify. And both years, man, I really felt like I should have gotten a spot. I had really good seasons. I was ranked pretty high. I had beaten some guys that were ranked really high, ended up placing in the brackets, and felt like I was done a little bit wrong. And I'll remember, man, that's why, like, I got to walk. I'll leave the name out because I don't know if he want me to tell it. He walked out of the coach's office where I was sitting my senior year. I was bawling, man. Like, my career was over as far as I was concerned. I was done. I was in rough shape. And I was sitting right outside the conference room where they were meeting, and a coach walks out, And he's like, just shook his head and he's like, I'm sorry, man. I tried to get you there. And just, man, that's one of my most vivid memories of my life. It just really physical pain in that moment. So to the people listening to this, if you get an opportunity for something, take advantage of it, because man, it might never come around again. So I only got 2 spots, and I wasn't one of those guys that got to go for whatever reason it was. I don't know. That's one of the questions I got for God when I get to heaven, why I didn't get one of those spots.
Dang, that's pretty tough, and it doesn't make sense to me why it wouldn't be different for different weight classes, because I know that, I mean, some weight classes and some conferences need to have more spots than others, and others less.
Yeah,
That doesn't really make much sense to me.
The way the system is now is so much better, man. Like, you kind of hold your destiny in your hands, right? It's not just to the fate of one day, which again, man, I could have done better those days. So I'll take a little bit of ownership too. But under the new qualification system, I'd have had a pretty good chance to go my junior and senior year.
And most likely, freshman too. If you made the finals of your conference, that would.
I'd actually need to go back and look and see how my ranked wins were. It had been close my freshman year because I really came on late. And I said I was about a 500 record going in because I went on that losing streak way early. It had been close.
Okay, so right after your college career, where did you go from there? I know you said you wanted to start coaching. That was where you were meant to be. So where did you start coaching right away?
Well, I'm not going to leave so like I said, man, that memory I have of sitting outside that office and waiting for the coaches to come out, that was a dark day, man, for me in my life, and really did a number on me, probably more than I ever realized until a few years later when I started repairing myself again. I had a year where I just didn't do much with my life, man. Like, I just kind of wanted to be normal, really. And in the back of my head, I told myself, like, I'm trained, do these things. But really, man, I was hurting. I was just lost and trying to figure out what to do with myself. And man, I lost is the best way to put it. I just didn't have anything productive going on in my head, and just really dark time for me. So I spent a year just kind of wallowing in my own misery up in Boone, and just, man, knew I needed to move on with my life. So after that year of not doing a whole lot of productive with myself, moved down to Georgia. Josh Stephen gave me a coaching job at Harrison High School, and I was my first job. I was teaching math and coaching with him, and we had a really good team and some really quality guys. Josh Condon, ranked #1 in the country, awesome guy. The Medveds, who I'm still really close with now, man, they started me down the path of really improving. Just had some really fun guys that first year coaching. And that's where it started, that first year being an assistant wrestling coach with Josh Stephen in Georgia.
So how much did your career as a wrestler, where, I mean, you started late, you had a lot to grow to get to the goals you wanted to reach. How much did that affect your coaching and your coaching style and the passion you had for coaching compared to the passion you had for as an athlete?
The passion probably to coach was more. Like I said at the very beginning of this, my path through wrestling's been a lot of adversity, Sam. For whatever reason, I failed way more than I've had success. But after those failures, man, I doubled down on it, and that pain that I talked about, that dark time, man, it can really take you to new heights. And man, there's so many stories out there. The Dawn Wall is one of my favorite documentaries. I rock climbed a lot at App State. It's one of the best places on the East Coast to climb. So, man, Tommy Caldwell, that's one of my guys, man. That's one of the guys I look up to a lot. Just how adversity ended up making him the best at something. And really, that dark time that I went through and the failure that I had through my college wrestling career really motivated me to go down a path of, I'm going to be the best at this. And it was a sit down conscious decision to where I decided, man, that this is my life's work. Like, I just felt the calling from God, and I started coaching, and I really loved it. And I was getting guys better, that I'm going to try to be the best at this thing. And man, the work ethic went up again, probably too much. I started struggling with balance a lot in my life because, man, when it's yourself, your body will let you know when you need to step back. There's only so many hours you can work. But coaching is more mental. Like you can just go and go and go, and you got so many guys that you're trying to help. The balance started to be an issue. I was probably putting in a little too much time and lost my way that way. But man, that's going to be a struggle my whole life. That's something that I've accepted. Everybody's got demons. Balance is going to be one of mine. Wrestling being my idol in life, that's my struggle. And I got to make sure it's second. God's first, wrestling second, and everything else works out. And I just got to keep learning that lesson. But the motivation went up with coaching, man. I loved it more than competing. I didn't get a lot of satisfaction out of winning myself. It was great. Yeah, it was awesome. But seeing other people win, man, that just fills me up. And I got addicted to it. So just helping guys out, man, and really improving. And then things were so accessible then. Flow wrestling was really starting to pop off at that time. And so I had insights to John Smith and all the best wrestling minds. And I got addicted to flow and just really started making a lot of jumps there. And as far as my coaching style goes, that's my dad, man. I coached the way I was raised. Very intentional, very disciplined, but at the same time with a lot of love in my heart. And I just give all my coaching style to my dad. I try and coach the way I was raised. He and my mom raised two pretty successful people. I'm doing pretty well coaching, and my brother's just unbelievably successful in the Department of Defense. So a lot of my coaching style just goes the way I was raised.
So you talked about flow wrestling, and I kind of think about that a lot. Is I'm growing up in the time of opportunity where I've got flow wrestling and track and everything right here so accessible to me. And you kind of started with the VCRs of the Granby School of Wrestling, and I just think it's so cool just the way the sport has evolved to the accessibility of everything. I mean, just get technique from John Smith and mindset from Terry Brands is at our fingertips is just crazy.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons the sport's growing so fast. Man, I think wrestling's getting in a really good spot. There's going to be some growing pains along the way, man. There definitely is, and especially when wrestling starts becoming a little bit more professional. It's not anywhere close yet. This is still a sport based on charity at the highest level. It's people giving money so they can pursue their Olympic dreams. There's a few guys that do it professionally, but most of them, man, they're just able to do it on charity. But yeah, it's a fun time for wrestling. And I would say, man, I wish flow would have been back around or I could have benefited from it, but I benefited from it so much as a coach. Just getting in the highest level rooms, and really my love affair with wrestling, coaching and technique. Technique specifically started with 08 Russian Nationals coverage. I remember sitting in my kitchen at Powder Springs, Georgia, watching Russian Nationals, and guys repeatedly put themselves in positions over and over and over again that I had no idea what was going on, scrambling, so to speak. And that's where I got obsessed with that. And then that was the next 3 years of my life, trying to develop a systematical understanding of these positions. People kept putting themselves in and winning. It wasn't just feel and funk and junk. There was technique to it. And that really shaped a lot of my technique philosophy of you can win in transition. It's not just high crotch, corner, double. There's a lot of things that happen in between. And I tell you, a funny thing that happened, just reading a book and I'm not a jiu-jitsu guy at all. I don't practice it. I don't watch it. But one of probably my biggest influences in my coaching is Marcelo Garcia. And if you go do any research on him, he's like the master of the scramble, one of the best jiu-jitsu guys of all time, kind of revolutionized the sport. And that was his philosophy, that he plays in people's blind spots. So where they're focused on this concrete set technique and the transition in between them, if he's focused on everything that happens in between those pieces, that you can't beat him. And that's become a lot of the way I look at wrestling. There's anything that happens on the mat I could teach. I can break it down. I can put it in steps. I can explain what they're doing, and I can get people to understand it. And he had a big part of that.
How did you come across him?
Reading The Fighter's Mind. It was I'm an avid reader, man. I read a lot of books, and I give credit to that to my mom. That was a demand growing up. My brother and I had to read, and she was very smart with the books she put in front of us. And I just fell in love with reading, man. I had a lot of great stories growing up. So I was reading The Fighter's Mind, and a chapter on it was about his philosophy and the way he thought about it. And it just clicked with me. And I was studying scrambling a lot at the time, and it just kind of fit. And I took a lot of his philosophy and implemented it in my own coaching style.
That's so cool. So I went to a camp of yours at Young Guns. I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe.
Hmm.
And you quoted a lot, Chop Wood, Carry Water.
Yes.
And I went home, read that book right away, and then got on like a rabbit trail of every book that I found that branched off of that, and all of Joshua Medcalf, who wrote that book, all of his book, and then all the books he recommends. And I've just been reading a whole lot lately since that camp. What are some other books that you've read that have been instrumental in your career?
Yeah, Sam. Quick side. I remember you at that camp, man. You worked your tail off, and not just worked your tail off. There's a lot of talent behind it too. So, I know you've got some fans out there that might not know your wrestling as well as they do the media side. Sam's a really good wrestler. He can scrap. So I know you're a humble guy, and that probably embarrasses you a little bit. But I remember you at that camp, man. You got some skills to you, and you definitely had a lot of work ethic. Yeah, chop wood, carry water. Iraqi, man. That was the way I was raised. Do it with your whole soul, with everything you got. Do it with everything you got. And it was Hunter Washburn. He came into a meeting one time, a wrestler we had graduated, and he talked about that book, and I read it. And it was the way I was raised. That book is my father. So that's a big part. I've got about 5 books that are kind of the pillars of what I believe in. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I had a mentor, Charles Pike, during the business days at a compound that was a lot of what he guided it by, and really talked about basically the premise is you learn how to become independent. So you've got 3 habits that make you independent. And it's about being proactive to where you don't react to life is kind of the gist of it. Then you learn how to be interdependent. And those skills you have, learn how to make the group better. And you start thinking we first instead of me. Which is another piece to the next book I have, but I'll get there in a second. And then the last habit's about continuing that through your life, sharpening the saw. So then I talked about the we instead of me. My ego's been a problem my whole life. I don't know why. I just got a big one. And I think a lot of myself. So Ego's the Enemy is another one that I read that clicked. I'm really a Stoic, and so is my father. Stoic philosophy is one of the things that got me out of my dark days. So I read a lot of Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, those kind of things. Ego's the Enemy is one I grabbed that really helped me get a handle on, man, the inflated self-image that was constantly being a problem in my life. So it was one that I constantly go back to. Part of it's almost like part of my daily routine. It might not necessarily be in Ego's the Enemy, but that ego dissolution's part of my daily routine that I have. So it's one. The Art of Learning, that's, man, outside of Chop Wood, Carry Water, that might be my number 2. It's basically meta learning. Everything you do applies to everything in life. So the lessons I learned as a competitor helped me as a coach. Did a lot of housework yesterday, and getting my house organized and clean is going to make me coach better at Midlands. And really how you can master anything. And Josh Waitskin, he's the reason I ended up getting the book. Searching for Bobby Fischer was one of my favorite books and movies growing up. It's about a chess prodigy. My brother played a lot of chess, and the guy was a grandmaster chess. He's black belt in jiu-jitsu, Tai Chi push hands, world champ. He's done a lot of cool things and wrote a book based on his journey through that. So that's a big one for me. Let's see, The Tipping Point. That's one of the things I look for in my life in every situation, and it's basically talks about bridging the gap between good and great, like Gable talked about. And once you reach that certain point, you pass it. So the tipping point's up there for me. Outliers, that was probably my first journey into self-help. So that's got a lot of sentimental value that I really like. I'm trying to think of some of the more recent ones that I've had that have been really good. Creativity Inc., the story of Pixar. That one I really enjoyed. Culture Code, that's one that Doug gave me. It's one of the things that he's trying to put into practice with UNI, and why we have such a great culture up there. That one's been really good. A fiction book, man, you need The Power of One. You need to read that book, Sam. It's about this guy growing up in South Africa and wants to be welterweight champion of the world. My mom, that's one of the books that my mom made me read when I was young. That's probably pretty close to your age, and that's when I started dreaming really big. So The Power of One's one that I have a lot of guys that I'm close with read. And man, it's one that about every 3-4 years I pull that book down and run through it. It talks about how one person can make a difference. And it's really not about boxing as much as it is about just doing good work in your life. And it's just got so many great characters. And it's a great story, man. It's a great read. So if you ever need a good read and you got time for a fiction book, get The Power of One. It's one you'll really like.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to dive into all these books. I'll go back and write all this down and see if I can get my hands on these. I'm excited.
I'd send it to you, man. I got a bunch of copies of it, but NCAA's like goofy about all the rules and stuff, so I can't send it to you, man. It's a bunch of crazy stuff, and some of it's good, some of it's bad, but it is what it is, man. Or I'd send you a copy of The Power of One. But Bryce Courtenay's the author, so if you get anyone, grab that one. It's just, man, it really shaped a lot of the pursuit I was on in my life, and really dreaming big, man. And if it comes down to what I try and convince people to do, like at the camps like that you were at now, when I get in front of people, is don't be afraid to dream big, man. You never know what's going to happen. And that's what gets me out of bed every day. I want to win an NCAA title as a coach. And when I'm coaching at Northern Iowa and I'm an assistant coach, people look at me like I'm a little bit crazy, but man, that's the way a lot of people have looked at guys that have done great things. So dream big, man.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm excited to get my hands on these books and dive in. But moving forward on your wrestling career, so after your first high school, you're assistant coach. Where did you go from there? Did you stay there for a while? How long were you there? And then where did you go from there?
1 year at Harrison. We had a great year, man. Had a Ironman champ. Almost won a state title. Got second. Didn't quite get it done. Collins Hill was really good at the time. They beat us. Then I went to Jefferson the year after that. I can't even remember why I left Harrison, to be honest. But I ended up going and being an assistant coach at Jefferson. The coach there, Doug Thurman, he had won like 20 state titles in a row. I'm not kidding. They'd won about that many in a row. And coached there for 2 years, had a great experience. Some things good. Jefferson, I don't know. It didn't really fit me for whatever reason. So I just wanted to do more with coaching. And that's when I met Cliff, really became friends with him. And we had an opportunity with a guy named Carl Vassallo, who was a big talker that didn't follow through with a whole lot, but ended up getting us pull the trigger on compound. And that's the shirt I'm wearing right now. It's the very first one that we ever had. And that changed everything for me, man. When coaching became my profession and I could do it all day long. Like from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, I had no other responsibilities other than coaching. That's when I really started to make some big jumps. And that's why, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Fred, my dude, and that's my brother, but that's one of the big reasons, man. He gave me an opportunity to be the coach I wanted to be. And if it wasn't for those 9 years of just completely dedicating myself to this, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now, Sam. I'd still be a JV coach in Georgia.
So how did you ever meet Cliff, and what was that relationship like at the beginning?
It was one of those things. It was like my first day wrestling, man. Like God put each other in our lives. We both need each other. And Cliff needs me and I need him, and we will for the rest of our lives, man. I always laugh and joke about that. Cliff will be the guy I retire and live next to, and we'll be doing previews when we're 82 years old and we're both retired and don't have anything else to do. We'll go back and bring Ropewell back in those days. But his son was a junior, I believe, or maybe a sophomore when I got to Georgia, and he was around my size. He's about 160 pounder, and he was really good. He wrestled at University of Indiana, and just Cliff doing anything for his kid just was like, hey, come down and work out with my son. And got to know him that way, and just it was one of those love at first sight things, man. Like we started talking with each other, and the passion each of us had, it just clicked. I don't know, man. We talk about it all the time. We don't really remember, man. It just we ever since that first day, we were ripping and running and a part of each other's lives. And 2 years after we met, compound wrestling, like we ordered mats, and I had to figure out how to make a living with this thing. So it's just God put each other in our lives, man. Honestly, it's really what it was.
So when you decided to dive into compound, were you still coaching at a high school at the time?
Yeah, I was. And that was a tough balance. A lot of the parents were upset a little bit because we had some guys in our club that they were competing against. And I don't know, man. I love, like, I'm not helping those guys beat anybody. But anyway, that's a different story. So yeah, it was a little bit tough, and it was a lot of hours because I was driving. Man, it was about an hour and a half drive from where I lived to the compound. But with Atlanta traffic, sometimes that was 3 hours. Sometimes it was impossible to make it. So that was pretty frustrating making that drive. So that was there wasn't a whole lot of sleep going on that year for me when I was coaching and driving down and doing the compound. But the next year, knew I wasn't going to be a teacher anymore. Didn't even renew my teacher's license and just went full speed ahead trying to pay my rent being a wrestling coach.
That's crazy. And did you move closer to the compound
Yeah, I was actually planning on.
after you did that?
I was planning on moving in the compound. I was just going to sleep on the wrestling mats. I just, Sam, this is my life, man. I don't need much else. And I've got a wonderful wife who, man, if we keep going down my journey, I'll talk about it a little bit, but I just don't need a whole lot else in my life. Like I said, this is my calling. So wrestling and my faith have become really one and the same. Like it's like almost missionary work for me in a way, but in a different way. I don't know, man. It's just where I'm supposed to show people God's love. And I just think that's the reason I love it so much, and I can't get enough. So I was planning on sleeping on the mats, and I mean, we had just a handful of kids, so I wasn't making any money. I mean, no money, $0 making money. But the Fretwells, being the people they were, Stephanie, Cliff's wife, was like, "There's no way you're sleeping on a wrestling mat." So she makes me up a bed and tells me to move in, and I fight it for a while, but they're just gracious people and let me move into their house and live with them for a while. Then we ended up getting a good situation where I had a little bit of an apartment right across the street from them. And that was most of the years of the compound. Just literally, I could throw a rock and hit their house from where I lived. So when I say we spent a lot of time together, man, we spent a lot of time together.
That's so crazy. And you had just met Cliff 2 years before that?
Yeah, we hadn't known each other really long. Probably we were 2.5 years in, and really, I mean, had not a whole lot of interaction with Stephanie since then. That's just, and she's got a big heart. I don't know why she loved me so much, but she did. She really didn't have much of a reason to. I took her husband away from her a whole lot and made him crazy about this sport. But she loved me and she took care of me. She's a special woman for me, man. That I don't know. I haven't had a whole lot of great relationships with women in my life, but she's one of the ones that started repairing those for me. She's got a big place in my heart, and I'll love Stephanie Fretwell forever.
That's pretty cool. So when you started coaching at Compound, how successful was the program, and what was that growth pattern like? Was it similar to your wrestling career?
Yeah, this is when I started being a little bit more meticulous. So I can go back and look. That's when I started journaling all the time, and I had a daily routine and really started trying to get better. So I know what this is like a little bit. And one of my first entries was, we don't have enough kids to pay the bills. So I learned I had to be good. Like I had to be good in a hurry, and we had to have results in a hurry because we had to get kids in the building. We had a few diehard parents, the Ruffins, the Hodges, that were in right away, and they helped get people in the door. But I wouldn't say we did a good job at first, but we worked really hard. And through that, our confidence grew. And then we all kind of got better. I had a really special group that first year, man. We ended up having like 11 guys going to college to wrestle out of that very first group we had. So it was just a bunch of guys that loved wrestling and worked really hard, and we all grew together. You know what a misconception is about this sport? They think it goes one way. They think coaches dump into their athletes, and that's the way it goes. Man, this is a two-way street. We get as much from you guys as you guys get from us. And that's why I'm pretty strategic with who I'm around and who I want to coach, because it does go both ways, man. Like I just had a really special group of guys: Hunter Gamble, Charles and Chandler Pike, Jake Hodges, Taylor Lujan, Ruffin, Higginbotham. Man, there's some guys I'm sure I'm leaving out just by my mind going blank. But man, those guys dumped into me and believed in me, and because of that belief, I was not going to let them down. So just tried to become the world's best technician and give them the best technique and the best training cycles I could, and really made a lot of progress pretty fast. And within 3 year time, man, we were doing pretty well. It was rough the first 2 years, didn't have a lot of results. I mean, I remember going to Super 32 and being done after about the third round. But then after about that third or fourth year, we started having national caliber guys that could go anywhere and wrestle. And then at the end, man, we were really doing well. We had a handful of hammers, and especially our youth group, man. We had a lot of killers in that group. And it was a lot of fun, man. Some of the best memories of my life that I'll know I'll have forever. Those 9 years at the compound were special times.
What were the ages of the kids you coached there
Uh,
at
we
the
had
beginning? That is.
we had let's see, we had 7 was the youngest one that we had come in and really train. We had one kid that was younger than that, but he just would come and hang out. I can't talk about him again, dumb NCAA rules there in high school and can't mention their name. But he would hang around on my shoulders and just walk around practice in a diaper, really. But we had a guy that was 7 that would pay enough attention to come in. So from 7 to senior in high school, we had guys all through that range. Normally 2 different practices. We'd split our youth in high school together, especially when our numbers got big. But had 7 to 18.
That's crazy. And so people would come to you 18, I imagine they're senior in high school, and you'd only get them for a year, and they'd come for you like right away.
Yeah, we had some of that. We ended up being a pretty close-knit family, and just my philosophy on it was like, if you wanted quick results, that I wasn't your guy. And we're going to do this the right way. And I treated every guy that came in the door like they wanted to be a world champ. And that's the way I trained them. And I think some of that rubbed off, and maybe that's why we had some guys really get in it. But if you were looking for quick results, man, I wasn't your guy. There was other places you could go. TWA was a lot better than that, and I'd send them to Dustin Kawa to go train. And we were more of a come in and really get committed to it and spend a lot of time. We had some seniors come in and spend 1 year with us, but that really wasn't the core of what we had. We had a group of about 60, 70 guys that were there all the time.
Wow, that's impressive to start out with that many kids. So as you started moving forward, you said about 3 or 4 years in, you started to see some real success, national level guys. After that, when Compound started becoming a known club and really starting to do well, what was that like? Did more kids start coming in? I know you guys had to extra locations, and then Ropewell started coming in. Just could you start just at the beginning explaining the timeline of how all that went down?
Yeah, so actually, Ropewell was pretty early in it, and that was 100% Fretwell thing. I told him it was the dumbest idea ever. Nobody was ever going to watch it. That's just what we did. We just sat down, and that was us. Like, that wasn't a scripted thing. That was just a normal sit down and talk about vague Cliff King invite, which is so weird now that I think about it. I'm actually coaching in it. That was the first preview we ever did, the long and dirty Vegas preview. Still don't know if it's up on Flow or not, but that's just what we did. We would sit down and we would talk about them, and man, this is the guys I like, and these are the reasons why, and these are the matchups that are good because of this stuff. And he's like, hey, we need to film this. Like, nobody wants to watch this, Fred. And he's like, well, I'm filming it anyway, because that's just what he did all the time. And so that kind of took a life of its own. And man, we got a lot of recognition probably before we were even good coaches because of how much we were on Flow and how much we were trying to help them out, just being some wrestling nuts and loving what they were doing, and probably stepping over lines that we weren't supposed to. And just, that's the way Cliff and I were. We were going to go help them. We were going to go do things, and we'd pick up a camera and film, whether he asked us to or not, most of the time. So Ropewell was early, and that gave us a lot of recognition. And then that got people in the door, probably because it was great advertisement. I don't know if Cliff did that on purpose or not, but it was genius because people saw us all the time. So people thought we were a lot better than we were at first. And then as time went on, Cliff and I got a lot better, and we could really develop some guys, and really started having a lot of success. And at the end, man, we had a lot of guys coming in, and partnered with Jeff Bedard, and he had a club up northern Atlanta, and that worked out great for a while until he went to coach in college. Had a good relationship with him. Jeff's one of my dudes too, but man, at the end, it really was kind of crushing. We were doing pretty well. And I'll tell you, the thing that I want to talk about during those times is I learned another valuable lesson. So struggling is one thing, and you can grow from struggling, and there's setbacks that come from it, but also from success too. And what I learned about myself is, like, I'm way better with failure than I am success. And I almost got lost in my sauce a little bit through how well we were doing. And I told you, man, ego is a struggle I've had my whole life, and really lost sight of it again there, and had to do some doubling down to get that back in check. Because, man, everywhere I went, people knew me. And like, it's not fame like people deal with all the time, but man, people knew me when I would go to wrestling tournaments, and it's something I kind of got hooked on. And man, I don't know. I lost sight of who I really was during there and lost my real purpose for doing this. And didn't last too long because, again, I've got great people in my life, and they reminded me that this is a service and it's not about me. I'm here to help other people. So, man, you just got to be careful with all that success that comes with it, because you can lose yourself in it. People talk about money, and man, money changes people, but so does recognition and success. So, hold on just a second. My wife's texting me. Give me 1 second. All right, bad radio, but back on. So man, you got to really be careful with the success you have too. And man, with your motivation and what you're doing, that's a lesson for you to be on. You're going to really be known, and man, people are going to look up to you and admire you for what you're doing. I already do, man. Like, man, people know who you are. You can say Sam Herring, and people are like, oh yeah, that's that young kid that knows so much about wrestling, tough wrestler, and man, he's on Flow, and man, he does a great job commentating. He's got this podcast. You just got a lot going on, man. So one of the things I'll advise you to do is pick a day where you really got some time and sit down, and it's going to change through your life, but write down who you are and who you want to be. The things that you don't want to change, like not for anything. There's nothing in your life that'll change them. And man, put them as reminders that you see every day, so that when you have success on the mat, off the mat, whatever you do in your life, you don't lose sight of who you are. Because not just you'll feel bad about it and you'll lose your purpose, but also, man, that's the reason you're having success. You're having success because of who you are, like who you get out of bed and be every day is what gets you to those levels. And sometimes people lose sight of that. And I know I did, as I really started to do well and started kicking a lot of butt on the wrestling mat, that I lost sight of who I was and why I was doing this. And if I would have continued down that path long enough, the success would have gone away. So, man, as you continue to grow and get better, man, just keep sitting down and really strip all that stuff away. And at the core, who's Sam Herring? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be remembered as after this is all said and done? Because, man, no matter how great we are at the end of our life, we're just another human being, right? 7 billion people on Earth, and we can make the biggest impact we can. But remember who you are at your core, and all the extra stuff, man, that comes and goes and fades away. But who you want to be, that's what really matters, man. And that's what's going to get you to what you want and give you peace of mind at night. So, man, I strongly encourage you, like, pick a day where you got some free time and sit down and, like, who do I really want to be? Like, what do I want to stand for? What things do I will not negotiate? I will not bend on. And just hold those true in your heart for the rest of your life, and it'll keep you in a good spot.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate that, and I plan to do that very soon. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries, man. It's I wish somebody would have given me that advice before we started crushing it so bad. It'd saved me probably about 6 months of losing my way a bit.
Well, so you had about 6 months, like you said, a little struggle, which is crazy that out of success and out of where you're shooting for comes the struggle. That's life. But
yeah,
anyway,
I'll tell you one thing. I want to clear up one thing. Hold on, I don't mean to interrupt you. I want to interrupt you real quick because I want to clear that up. So with it wasn't struggling that anybody could see. It was struggling internally. It was what you know's right in your heart. And it's when you put your head down at night that you're comfortable with who you are and you're proud of who you are. And that's what I was struggling with. It wasn't, man, we were still killing it. Like, man, we had a lot of really good wrestlers, and the amount of work we put in, that doesn't go away in a short amount of time. But man, I really wasn't proud of who I was, because again, I'd lost sight of what I was about. And this was about something bigger than myself. And it started becoming about the brand, the compound, and how much we were winning. And, well, we got to go win more. And, okay, now I got to get out there more, and I got to get better. And it wasn't that, all right, man, this is just an act of service, and we're going to have a lot of success with it, but I need to let somebody bigger and smarter and wiser than me handle what this turns into. And that's kind of what my philosophies in coaching, man. I might publish it. I write a lot. And one of the things I wrote was, it's pretty famous. You get what you earn. And when I first started writing, I don't know that I believed that, especially my journey through wrestling. I don't know if you got what you earn, but then in a roundabout way, I talked myself into it. And what I decided, man, is I don't need to worry about what I earn. That's God's responsibility for me and my beliefs. Like, God's going to take care of what I earn, like what I get. Mine is the earning. I got to get up and earn it, and I'll let God turn it into whatever he wants it to, man. So just clearing up that part of where I got lost a little bit. Like, man, it's not, nobody's going to be able to see it, but it's inside, and you got that little bit of itch that you need to get it cleaned up. So sorry to interrupt you, but I had to clean that part up real quick.
No, I'm glad you did. I really appreciate everything. So after you guys started having some serious success, when did the clothing brand start coming in, and how important was that to the compound's growth?
It would have been probably 5 years in. And it was something, Cliff had a normal 9-to-5 job. He worked at an ad agency, and marketing he's gifted at it. Again, we wouldn't have had the success we did without his expertise in getting the brand out there and turning it into something that, I mean, when there was a good wrestler in Georgia, Sam, people thought they trained with us, whether they did or not. That's just how much he got the brand out there. So it was more one of those things about trying to give Fred what I had to where he could do this all the time. And we had a buddy, Brandon Veazey, who was pretty constant in our life, just a great guy. Ended up going to law school and getting out of wrestling. Terrible decision. I always joke with him. I'm kidding, but it was a great decision for him, but a terrible decision to get out of wrestling and go to law school. But he had been on Cliff about it a lot. And Cliff had some things happen to where, man, it just company downsized and he had to move on. And Brandon showed up with LLC papers for Compound Clothing. And then we started down that journey of trying to figure out how to run a real business. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, a gym, it's a business, but it's a service business. It's a little bit easier than having inventory and managing cash flow and like really doing payroll and a lot of those things that we had no idea about and didn't while I was there at all. Cliff figured all that out as they went on. But man, really quickly, it made me realize that I'm a wrestling coach to my core. That's what I love. That's what gets me out of bed every day. That's what my work ethic's about. And that's what I have to have in my life. It just, I don't know, Sam, coaching wrestling is just something that fills me up in a way nothing else does. And that's what Compound Clothing made me realize that, man, it was an opportunity. Cause, I mean, I didn't make a ton of money when I was a club coach by any means. We just kept dumping it back in the business and helping things grow. So it was like, yeah, man, I'm tired of eating ramen noodles and like barely making ends meet every month. So it was an opportunity to make some real money. And that's part of, like, at the end when I lost my way, figuring out too, like, all that, man, that doesn't mean anything to me. And I shouldn't say that because you got to have enough money to make it or life gets stressful. But man, coaching is who I am. And it helped change Cliff and Stephanie's life. And I'm glad I had a little bit of part in that. And because I owe them so much, I'll never repay the debt of them giving me the opportunity to be a professional wrestling coach. So I'm glad I had a part in getting clothing started and pressing out a lot of t-shirts and trying to figure some things out to help them out. But that's really a Cliff and Stephanie thing more than it is a Lee Roper thing. I get way too much credit for Compound Clothing. I was just a lot of grunt work in the beginning and then figuring out I'm a wrestling coach and that's what I want to do. But it was a big part of making Compound successful and keeping it growing.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. I imagine it's a little bit of the same thing that you guys made your name in a little bit of the flow stuff and the rope well, and that built the brand of Compound as well. I imagine the Compound Clothing did really help the training facilities and wrestling program itself.
Yeah, it definitely all worked together for sure. And we were doing well based on being wrestling people. That we got business. We shouldn't have gotten the business that we got, but people loved wrestling and loved us. So yeah, well, Travis Gerard, I remember that was one of the first orders we put through at North Forsyth. Like I remember folding and pressing out shirts in Cliff's garage. That was one of the first orders we did. So we had got a name in wrestling that we were wrestling people, and you know how wrestling people are, man. They're loyal to wrestlers, and they were loyal to us and helped us out. Like literally helped us pay the bills.
That's so cool, and it just has got to go full circle. So like your wrestling prowess and your wrestling name built another name for your clothing brand, and that built a name for your Ropewell media personalities, and so on and so forth. And goes full circle like that to help each different asset, each different asset of compound. Um, so did you personally have a relationship with Coach Schwab as a compound coach prior to when you moved up there to UNI?
Yeah, that's actually how I met Doug. So, long story short, we were bringing Metcalf in to do an intensive camp, and he'd made the world team, so he didn't have time to do it. Calling around trying to find guys, Doug ended up being the guy. Came down, and it was just another one of those God put him in my life moments. So we just clicked, and Doug ended up being a guy for me that really helped my confidence as a coach and believing in myself. He was pretty instrumental in that. And just, man, if you ever get around Doug, he's an incredible human. Very similar to Cliff and Stephanie. He and his wife are just they have the biggest hearts outside of my wife of anybody I know. And just really cared about me a lot. And met Doug through coming down and doing a bunch of camps for us, just started making him a regular, bringing him down all the time. Because, man, again, it goes both ways. I was getting better being around him and developed a relationship with that, him coming down and putting our guys through some really tough intensive camps and putting me through some crazy hard workouts, making me grow in that aspect. And that's just what that guy is, man. He makes you grow. I've had a hard time explaining Doug. He's a hard guy. He's so many facets of his personality, but probably the thing he's best at is making people grow. And that's why I'm here, man. That's why I'm coaching at Northern Iowa.
So you say that when did the conversation of moving to UNI and being a coach there come? Because honestly, going from club coach to college coach is a very rare thing to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm proud of, Sam, to be honest. And again, I got to be careful because my ego is always a problem. But it is one of the things I'm most proud of in life, that I've made it coaching based on my coaching results, that I can develop guys and I can create culture. And that's why Doug was interested in giving me a job, because he saw the culture we had and he saw the skills our guys had and knew I could do it at that level. But it came really with, again, God working in my life. So we'd had an incredible year, the best year at Compound. I mean, just an incredible amount of success. Everything we went to, we did really well at. And I was just restless. I was almost bored that, like, what's next? What's the next step? Where's my growth going to be? So I was going to move. I was going to go start a new compound at another place. Some things going on in my life that it was just the right time to do it. And that's what I called Doug about. I was like, hey, man, I'm thinking about maybe putting a compound in Iowa. Where would you put it? Like, what city does it need to be in? Is there enough people in Cedar Falls to do it there? Or do I need to go to Des Moines or Iowa City? And I'd had those conversations with people from a few other states, because that was my plan. Let's go try and do this where there's more competition. I felt like I had Georgia. I don't want to say beat. That sounds bad, but I had it figured out there. And I needed something tougher to help me grow. So that was the plan. And I don't know, a few hours went by, and then Doug sent me a message and like, hey, I'm interested in getting you involved with what I'm doing. And man, Sam, I'm a planner, probably too much sometimes, and really intentional about my life. But that was one of my split-second decisions I've made. And again, it goes back to something bigger than me working in my coaching career. That I was going to Iowa to coach with whatever. I didn't know what my job was going to be. Just didn't care, really. I was just going to be part of what Doug was building, because I was supposed to. Like, God was moving me in that direction, and it was just very confident. Everybody thought I'd lost my mind, the people in my life. I mean, we were rolling, and like compound wrestling, and like I was a big part of it. Like, I had built that thing up from scratch and had a lot of help along the way. Thomas Kimbrell, Jeff Bedard, Chris McClafferty. I had a lot of help, but man, like, put a lot of hours into it, and it was like my child. It really was. And man, that I just was like, gave it all up and left. Like, and my parents were probably worried about me a little bit, I imagine, because I'd had those dark times before, and they were wondering if I was back in it. And it was just the right thing, man. I just believe in Doug that much, that like the thing that I created, I knew what he believed in and what he wanted to create. I could help him get there, and it was going to be something, I don't know, man, really special. And I still don't know what that's going to be. We're still on that path, and again, I'm just trying to let God take care of that. It'll be what it is. But man, we're having a lot of fun right now and figuring a lot of things out together. And it's been one of the better decisions, other than marrying my wife, that I've made in my life is coming up here and being around Doug. He's gotten me to levels as a coach that I didn't know existed, and probably more than that, given me peace of mind, which has always been a struggle for me. I've got a really restless, hyperactive mind, and finding peace in all my craziness is a tough thing. And it's just something he's really helped me out with a lot. And man, one of the very special people in my life is Doug Schwab, and I'm glad that Metcalf made the world team, and I brought him down to a camp, and our relationship hit off after that, because it's been a blessing every day.
That's so cool that it all sprouted from Metcalf making the world team. It just traced him back like that. It's crazy how big things happen like that from such small, seemingly meaningless things, but had so much meaning. So did Rebecca go up with you to Iowa in that time?
At first, she was not going to. So we were dating at the time, and we were pretty serious. There's some things that had happened along the way that knew that I'd loved her, and I had bad relationships in the past, and I was out on relationships, man. I didn't think I was going to be a part of my life, and I had really gotten in tune with my faith and the direction God wanted me to go in. Like, really gotten back connected to that, and I just thought relationships were something that wasn't going to be for me. Like, wrestling coaching was my calling, and that's just what my life was going to be about. And when that ended, okay, I'll figure out the next phase of my life. So I thought, man, I love Becca, but it was going to be tough because I was going to Iowa, and she didn't have any connections or ties to Iowa. She had her own plans and own friends and own social group, and it was like very tearful goodbye, but it was a goodbye. And the kind of woman she was, that was unacceptable to her. And after a short amount of time of that separation, and she said, "I'm coming." And that's probably the moment I knew that I was going to be with that woman for the rest of my life. Funny story, I'm a lot older than Rebecca. So I was coaching I was coaching in high school when she was in high school. And her friends had backed up the story, because I didn't believe it for a long time, that she was sitting up at the stands at the state tournament. And it was either my first or second year coaching. And she's like, I'm pointed to me on the floor, and she's like, "I'm going to marry that man." And man, that's for me, like, that's when I know something bigger. Like, that's crazy, man. Like, the fact that she didn't know me from anybody and pointed me out of a crowd of, I don't know, 10,000 people. And it's like, "I'm going to marry that guy," and it happened. That's how I know something bigger than me is working in mine and her lives. Like, man, we're supposed to be together. And she's a big reason why I'm so, I don't know, healthy now. My obsession can turn into a disease a whole lot. And she's just brought a lot of peace in my life. And I've talked about it one other time, but I had a fear at the end of my life that, man, I was going to be alone, because I knew I had dedicated myself to the sport, that I was going to do everything in my power to be as good as I possibly could and help as many people along the way as I could. And I thought at the end of my life, I was just going to be by myself. And it was what it was. It was like, goes back to the good to great thing. It was a sacrifice I was going to have to make. But Becca took all that away. And now I've got somebody that's along the journey with me every day. And she's my soulmate, man. It's the only way I can describe it. So she ended up coming up after about a month, and we found a really good spot up here and developed a life in Iowa now.
And you were living with the Schwabs at the time, right?
Yeah, I lived in their basement for about 6 weeks. And that's just the kind of people they are. They just don't worry about it, man. You'll find a place. Don't sweat it. And this is really Allison. It's just like, we got an empty bedroom down in the basement. Just stay there until you figure it out. And just, those are the kind of people they are, man. That just sums it up. How many people they've brought through their home and just taking that concern and worry away. There's great people, man. So gracious, such a big heart. Yep, lived in their basement for a while.
So I imagine there's a pretty big, but at the same time not very big difference. It's just it's got to be so confusing when you coach at a club and your job outside of wrestling is making the club have a big name and get people to come to that club.
Yep.
But coaching at a college is a little bit different. Your job is to, and it obviously depends on which coach you are and what the head coach needs you to do. But outside of coaching your wrestlers, your job is recruiting, getting donors involved, and stuff like that. And so outside of wrestling, there are some pretty big differences, but in the core of wrestling, it's got to be pretty similar, I imagine. Are there any differences inside of wrestling and coaching club athletes and youth in high school versus college?
Yeah, actually, the outside of it's really similar to running a small business too. You put on a lot of different hats, and that's what you do as a small business owner, man. There's a lot of similarities to there. So there's a lot of college coaches out there that they're really entrepreneurs at heart and would do really well if coaching doesn't work out, starting their own thing, because that's pretty much what being a college coach is running a small business. But on the mat, I'll tell you, man, I've had a crazy wrestling journey from coaching. I've coached at all levels, and I think that's really helped make me a well-rounded coach. And I'm telling you, the only difference from coaching 7-year-olds to coaching 25-year-olds is the distractions are different. The hurdles are different. So the things you have to overcome are different. Other than that, man, it's not a whole lot different. You can win with any skill set you want if you practice it enough and master it. Just the distractions, the things you have to overcome, the mental side of it's different, which the athlete gets a little bit older. But man, young kids want to win, and it's important to them, and they'll work really hard. And you've got to keep it healthy for them, just like you have to do a college athlete, some different ways. But man, it's really more similar than it is different. And man, I'm very thankful that I've coached from very beginners all the way up through senior level guys, and it's helped make me a well-rounded coach and given me a pretty diverse skill set that I think I can help out a lot of different types of personalities and a lot of different types of wrestlers. But I don't know. I think a common misconception is like college wrestling's different. Like coaching wise, it's not much different. It's not just what they're dealing with outside of the room's different, and their support system's different. But other than that, man, it's really similar, man. Guys want to win, and got to get them to work hard and sacrifice to do it and keep it healthy along the way.
How long have you been at UNI so far?
Let's see. This is my 4th year, 5th year, one of those two, something like that. I think, let's see, 4th year. This is my 4th year up there. No, 5th year, because I got in with Maximum's freshman. This is my 5th year.
Okay. So when did Taylor Lujan come in? I mean, you coached him when he was little at Compound, right?
Yeah, that's a funny story. So during Taylor's recruiting process, and Northern Iowa was a big part of it, I knew I was going to coach there, but couldn't let anybody know because I didn't want to influence Taylor's decision. Taylor's a big part of my life, and man, I would not be the coach I am without him. And there's a lot of people along the way that have helped it, but he's way up there at the top of the list with what he's demanded of me from the very beginning. And he's been the hardest worker in the room since, man, the first day he came into practice. And that's why he's the wrestler he is today. But that was a strange thing, man, to have to keep that secret from him and not want to influence where he was going to go. And I honestly thought he was going to go to Minnesota. That's where I thought he was going to commit to. But it was a really good day when he committed. And I said, hey, bud, guess what? That's where I'm going too. And it's just been there's been a lot of highs and lows and ups and downs and bumps in the road and a lot of success with Taylor and I. But to coach a guy for 11 years is a very rare but very, very special experience that, I mean, I'll never probably get to have again. I don't know if I'll ever get to coach a guy that long. And Taylor's a big part of my life just by how long we've been with each other and how much we've grown through the sport together. So that was a strange time having to keep that secret from him while he was making his choice.
So let me get this straight. You decided you were moving up to Iowa and going to coach there while his recruiting process was going on.
Yeah.
And he had no idea, and he still committed there.
Yeah, I don't know, man, just the way that thing works out. And I asked him why. And I was like, Taylor, why Northern Iowa later on? And he's like, I don't know, coach. Every time I saw myself winning the national title, I was wearing a UNI singlet. And man, it's the culture, it's the fit, it's Doug. Like, it's what he's building up here. It just fits Taylor. It just, man, a lot of people get caught up in the recruiting thing and on the wrong things. and they don't think about fit, and they don't think about what satisfies them as a person. Because, man, there's so much that goes into being great, and man, how many small details you got to cover to be an NCAA champ, that the fit is so important that sometimes the glitz and the glamour can be distractions, and they don't think about the culture of the team and what they stand for, and if that speaks to them as a person. And it did for Taylor. What Doug was building spoke to him on a level that's hard to make tangible and describe, but it was just right for him to go, and that's basically why he committed. There's just, when it came down to it, there was no other place for him to go, and hopefully he doesn't have a whole lot of regrets. We talk a lot, and he's never brought any up, but man, he's doing a great job, and man, what a incredible young man. If you ever get a chance to be around Taylor Lujan and get to pick his brain and be around him, he's a fine human being. I count him very high up on my list as far as people that I admire and respect. He's a great individual.
That's so incredible and crazy too that just happens, that you guys have a relationship since he was little. You've been coaching him, and just what a coincidence that he decides to go to the place that you're going with no idea.
Yeah, it's been a fun experience. I'll tell you, the hardest year was my first year, because I really, on purpose, didn't coach him a whole lot. Taylor had to figure some things out on his own, and I just didn't want it to be a continuation of what we had done before. I don't know, part of growing to college is for young men turning into men, right? And you almost have to turn them loose a little bit, let them figure out things on their own. So, man, that was a strange year for both of us. And Taylor probably thought I was mad at him for a long time, just because I didn't do a whole lot of development with him that year, and just kind of turned him loose and let him figure things out on his own and figure out the other coaches that he might connect with. Like Randy might be better for him. Doug might be better for him. And Randy does a lot of his development still, man. And they've developed a good relationship, and just cutting him loose and letting him figure out some of those things. And then as it comes back around, like Taylor and I fit, man. So we spend a lot of time together and still do a lot of work on the mat, off the mat. And, but that was a strange year for both of us.
I bet it was hard to not tell him that that's where you were going, especially when he was thinking. I bet was he talking to you a lot, like, "Hey, coach, I'm really thinking about going to the UNI. What do you think?" Or did he ever do something like that?
Yeah, man, we talked about it all the time. I mean, I never told kids where they should go, but like I asked questions and I listened, and I was kind of the sounding board for it. And yeah, it was strange with him talking about the different places, and knowing Taylor, like he'll get on something and get real high about it. So it was Nebraska for a while, and then it was Minnesota for a while, and then it was Virginia for a while, and then it was UNI for a little bit, and then it went back to Minnesota, and then ended up committing to UNI. So it was definitely a strange time. But Sam, I'll be honest, man, I didn't care if he didn't go to Northern Iowa. Taylor's life and his goals are bigger than me being a part of his life, right? Like, of course, I would wanted to keep coaching him, and I think I can continue to develop him and take him to Olympic level if that's what he chooses to do. But that's it. It's his choice. And his choices are way more important than what I want for his life. And so if he'd have gone to Minnesota, I wouldn't have been sad at all, man. I'd have been happy for him and would have really had a tough time trying to figure out how to beat him, but that'd have been part of my job. And just, it worked out, man. It worked out great. Didn't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Well, that's good that never had to happen, but that's just blowing my mind that's how it worked out. So in your last couple years at UNI, I mean, you got there. I've kind of noticed your main job outside of wrestling has been the recruiting, and that's kind of where you're putting a lot of your focus. What is there any difference in recruiting that you've had to learn? What are some things that you had to focus on since moving from club to college?
Oh yeah, man, it's a whole new world. And I learned so much from Randy Pugh. Randy's the most humble, quiet. He don't want to be in the spotlight at all, but man, that guy's a secret weapon at UNI. And I've learned so much from picking his brain on recruiting. And still, man, I'm still an infant when it comes to that. And that's kind of my big focus right now. I figured I'd coach for about 50 years, so I divided my coaching up into 10-year segments. And the segment I'm on right now, this 10 years, is about recruiting. And I'm going to try and be the best recruiter in the country and find the right fit. And it used to be more almost like competition, right? You go after the best guy and you want to get them. Well, they might not be the right fit. So trying to figure out the guys that'll succeed and have success more, and then trying to find those intangibles that are going to translate to college. And then skill set, when you're good, man. Any skill set works, from single legs to headlocks. If you're good enough at it, it'll work at the college level. So I don't get too caught up in that, other than like maybe styles fit well for one of the guys or personalities fit well for one of the coaches on the team. But man, I'm still learning a whole lot about recruiting and how to get a guy to believe in Northern Iowa. Probably the biggest thing I've learned this year is I'm not trying to convince guys to come anymore. I think that's a bad policy because I don't know, man. We're influential people, right? You can persuade somebody to do something that might not be right for them. So all I try and do is communicate what we're about as passionately and clearly and as persistently as I can. And the guys that speaks to will come, and you'll get the commitment from them. And then the guys that don't, they won't, and they need to go somewhere else. UNI is not a fit for everyone. I believe in it so much, man. And I think if you're a high-level wrestler out there that's got big goals and wants to achieve big things, you need to come look at Northern Iowa. We got some things that are pretty special and different from a lot of other places. But like I said, it's different from other places, and it's got to speak to you and what you want out of your life. So that's probably the thing I've learned this year is I'm not trying to convince guys to come. I'm just going to talk about what we're about, what we stand for. And if that speaks to you, you'll get excited about it. You'll want to come. And it's funny, when I started doing that, you started getting more commitments out of guys. And I don't know, just it's not a game, man. And I try not to treat it like that. It's not something to be won or lost. It's just finding the right people to be involved with what you're trying to build. And bigger than that, be involved with your life. Because remember, this goes both ways, man. I'm going to give a lot to them. So is Doug, so is Randy, so is B-Rob. But they're going to give a lot back to us. And I want to find some guys that are making my life healthier, more wholesome, happy, and get me better as well.
Well, that's really cool. So a few more things I want to ask about your move to UNI. What's it like moving from Georgia, where it's beautiful weather? You went to college in North Carolina, and now it's Iowa, where it snows in the winter. What's that?
Oh, man, it's so much better weather out here. You're crazy. Those summers in Georgia, you can have them, man. It's so hot, you can't do anything. It's miserable. Summers here are awesome. It's about the only free time you got. It's 85 degrees. You get out, and it's a wonderful day. I don't know, man. And maybe because it's Iowa and it's wrestling crazy out here, I love it. The winters don't bother me. Yeah, when it's -10 out and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour, that stinks. But so is it when it's 102 and 100% humidity in Georgia. So I mean, I actually enjoy the weather better out here. I don't mind the cold as much as I mind the heat. Maybe just because I grew up in it all the time. And
Yeah.
Boone was cold and windy and snowy too, so it got me prepared for it. The weather out here hadn't been bad at all, not one bit.
Well, that makes sense, but I'm a little bit the other way. I like the hot weather a little bit better than the cold.
You can have it, man. You can have it.
To that extreme. But what about the culture in Iowa? So you wrestle at West Gym. I mean, I know that place is just crazy. So many knowledgeable, passionate fans in Iowa that really care about the sport of wrestling and dedicate a lot of their time and life to it, and they're just fans. What's that culture switch like? I know it's got to be a lot different from Georgia.
Yeah, it is, and there's some good and bad things about it. But Sam, that's one of the things I love about Iowa, man. And while it'll be hard for me to ever leave, life changes and things happen, right? So I never say never in life because you just don't know what God's going to hold for you. But I think that's what I enjoy about it the most. Everybody's connected to the sport just about. Their brother wrestled, their dad wrestled, their uncle was an All-American. Like everybody's connected to the sport and they understand what it's about. And most people have been involved with it. And you know, man, you're a part of it. You're neck deep in it just like I am. Wrestling, it changes you in a certain way. And it's just a great community. And the fact that it is so important out here, that the community is just that much stronger. This is really the first place that I've called home since I've been an adult. I've lived a lot of places and I've had houses in places, but this has been home, and it's just a great community. And wrestling's my life, man. And wrestling's a big part of Iowa culture, and I think that's just why it fits me so much.
Definitely, and I definitely feel that as well. I mean, I feel like it's magnetic and it spreads. I mean, passion and asset and anything in life is it's contagious and it spreads. And I just love to be around people who are passionate and especially about the same things I am. So a place like Iowa's it's got to be just awesome to be around insanely passionate people like that.
It is, man. I struggle in life a little bit just because I don't have a lot else, man. I have my faith, I have my dogs, I have my wife, I have wrestling, and I play video games as a distraction. And that's about it, man. I don't have a whole lot of connections. So the fact that the people out here get one of my passions, that's probably why it's home for me.
Well, I wish you and I was still going to the Southern Scuffle. We get to come back home for you and I think I'm starting to go out there every year. I'll be going for my second time. I love that. That was actually my first college event last year when I went. But I wish you and I was still doing that. I'd get to see you.
I
Um,
know it, man.
but you're going to Midlands.
Yeah, got to get around you again for sure, man. Like you're infectious about sport, and I hope you get to do some commentating because I really enjoyed it last year. And the scuffle was great. We had a good time there, but just looking for a different competition. Midlands right across the street, Chicago for us. So there's reasons why we go, but looking forward to that too. Scuffle's a great event. I wrestled in the first scuffle, so it's got a warm place in my heart.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. You competed for App State in the first ever.
Yep, I wrestled in it. I think 3 years of college. I started it my sophomore year, and I always wrestled really well at the scuffle for whatever reason. I always had good tournaments there.
Well, now Compound sponsoring the tournaments. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, full circle, man. It's the story of my life.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the time. This has been the longest interview that I've had, but definitely one of the best, and I'm really glad I got this one in.
Sam, we'd sit on and talk about wrestling all the time, man. And like I said, I wish recruiting rules were different to where I could call you up on the phone and talk about Cliff Keen invite, man, because I know we'd have fun doing that. But man, keep doing what you're doing. And I know it's been a long podcast. If you want to like split it up into like my wrestling days and my coaching days, that could work. But do whatever you want with it, man. And if you ever need help with anything, reach out, man. I got a
I
lot of
sure
admiration.
will.
Got a lot of admiration for what you're doing. I'll help you any way I can.
Well, I appreciate it, and I think people will enjoy this one, and I hope as much as I did. I love long interviews. That means really that we really got into it, and I mean I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk with me.
Anytime, Sam. You're the man. I really enjoyed this, man. I'd been pretty busy and worn down, and I don't know, just going through my whole journey of wrestling just made me realize how blessed I am. I'm gonna have a good day because of this, man. I appreciate what you're doing, and it's definitely made a difference for me today, and it's given me something to scratch my itch on wrestling. So keep HMA going, and any help you need, man, reach out to me.
I sure will. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Take care, buddy. Have a good break.
All right, you too.
Later, man.